So good afternoon. It's afternoon everywhere except for you, Ed, I think. And welcome to the fourth of the five Sunday series of lectures for the Israel 75 Academy. And here are the details of our two speakers for today, Dr. Joel Weiner and Zvi Ittelson. And before we start and before I turn the things over to Joel, please could you all mute yourselves. And the other customary announcement is if you have questions, if you could please post those to the meeting chat, and then at the end of Joel's presentation, we'll try and work through each and all of the questions or comments that people raise. And finally, before I hand it over to Joel, again, we have the customary acknowledgement and thanks to our three sponsors. First of all, Heinrich Köhler, which is part of the Global Philatelic Network with Corinne Fieler in Zurich and H.R. Harmer in New York and John Bull Auctions in Hong Kong. And our second sponsor is House of Zion. And we again appreciate their support for the exhibition that we're doing, the presentations, the talks, and of course the exhibits, which are up on the website. And then our third sponsor is the Champion Stamp Company in New York. And they're a little different to the others. They're not an auction house, but they're actually retail dealers. And they specialize not only in stamps, but also in banknotes. So without further ado, I will stop my screen sharing. And I'd like to pass everything over to Joel Weiner, who's going to speak to us on the postmarks of Jerusalem during the British Mandate. So Joel, if you'd like to unmute and start to share your screen, we're all in your good hands.
Okay, I just got to figure all this out. Just a second. I got to find the right screen. Let's see. Are you seeing my screen share?
Not yet.
Oh.
Green button, middle bottom.
Yeah, just a second. I pushed it. Let's try it again. And
we still see you. Now it's there.
It's there?
It's coming up. It says Zoom.
Okay. And now you see.
Thank you to the Society of Israel Philatelists and the Israel Philatelic Federation.
Okay, so it's full screen now?
Yes.
Okay, so let me I just got to get rid of all the pictures of all you guys. There, okay. All right, so I'm going to introduce myself. And first of all, I'd like to thank the Society of Israel Philatelists and the Israel Philatelic Federation for organizing these Israel 75 Philatelic Talks. So I've been a collector since, as others have said, since I was 9 years old. Collected worldwide for a number of years, and then took a hiatus, as many did, during university, graduate school. And I took it back up in early 70s when I was at Stanford, my wife, and we were living in Palo Alto. And in Redwood City, there was a Peninsula Stamp Club, and I joined that, and I started to collect Israel and Palestine. And at the time we had a couple of well-known dealers there. House of Zion, Ed Rosen was there, and Manny Pearl, who was a Palestine dealer, and he got me interested in Palestine stamps. And so I started exhibiting back then. So my first exhibit was in 1975 at and it was the exhibit of Palestine stamps at the Peninsula Stamp Club. And oops, went there. And so this is the picture. It goes back quite a ways to see how long I've known Ed. This is Ed Rosen, and I'm on the right, getting my award for an exhibit back at Pipex in the Peninsula Pipex, different from the other Pipex, in 1975. So I started collecting Jerusalem postmarks about the same time. I bought a collection from a company, Ed Croft may remember them, F.E. Eaton in Vancouver. And I bought a collection of Jerusalem covers, and that got me interested. That was in 1973. And so I've been collecting Jerusalem covers for 50 years. It's quite a while. So here's an outline of my talk. It's sort of in 4 sections. We'll talk a little bit about the military and occupied enemy territory administration and their post office from 1917 to 1920, the civil administration and the mandate from 1920 till it ended in May 1948. I'll then have a section on the sub post offices in Jerusalem. And finally, if time permits, I'll talk about all the things that GPO controlled in Palestine in the mandate period, everything from the savings bank, car licenses, telephones, etc., all of which had post cancellations, at least. So there are 3 catalogs that I'm going to sort of the Bible for this area. The first was published by Zev Galibov in 1982. It was by Emmanuel Glassman and Michael Sacker, and it's the postmarks of Palestine of Jerusalem. And this gives really a ton of information, collected everything that was known at the time. In addition, this book has a huge section on the government departmental markings that were used on covers in Palestine, Jerusalem. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm going to limit it to the postmarks of the post office. This was republished in its entirety in Michael Sacker's book, The Postal Markings of Mandate Jerusalem, 1917 to 1940. That was published in 1995. And then Manuel Glassman did an update of the catalog in 2002, shortly before he passed away, and updated them, the cancels, the dates of use, and so forth. And a lot of the covers you're going to see here, he used my pictures for that book, but there's not many copies available, unfortunately. Now, there's one other book that I haven't shown here, and that's Edward Proud's Palestine Mandate Postal History book. Now, his book contains dates of use of many of the Jerusalem cancels. The Glassman book contains dates of use of many of the cancels. These vary considerably, and so I'm going to show dates, but take them all with a grain of salt. And I have my own information. I'm not going to get into that. That's on my exhibit of what I found for dates, but we'll just leave it at sort of roughly dates of use. Now, sometimes you'll see cancels were used over a very long period of time. It doesn't mean they were used continually over that time. They were sitting in stores, in the post office stores, and sometimes they just got taken out and reused. So some of them are really quite rare, even though you'll see what looks like a very long period of use. So, of course, the story starts when Allenby entered Jerusalem on December 17, 1918. And here is a picture of him walking into Jerusalem. And he walked in rather than riding a horse because of his respect for the holy city. And immediately when he came in, the city was in total disarray. The Turks had left. They left everything in a mess. And one of the first things they did was to set up a post office. And this was a military post office, but it was accessible to civilians. And Ed Croft talked about this, what's called the first interim period, because they didn't have any postage stamps yet. And so mail was allowed to go free. So I'm not going to get into that in any detail because you've heard about it in detail from Ed. But here's a postcard, the first interim postcard. It's to Switzerland. It's on the SZ 44 cancel. Now, SZ 44. So there's some disagreement on what that really stands for. The S, is it Suez? Is it Southern? There's different views of what the S stands for. The Z stands for these post offices were linked to the base army post office Z in Alexandria. So the Z is there, but the S said, we'll just use Southern Zone or Suez Zone for that. And this is the cancel with the date in one line. You can see here, 21st December, 1917 in one. There were 2 hammers. These are skeleton hammers. They were made locally, and the text, the type is removable and can be cleaned and reset. And this cover, this postcard you can see was taxed when it got to St. Gallen in Switzerland. Switzerland was one of the countries that did not accept free mail and taxed the mail from Palestine on arrival. This cancel SZ 44 was used roughly from December 1917 to January 1919. And this is an early cover, 21st December, only 4 days after the British had entered Jerusalem. So this is a picture of the post office. It's on Allenby Street, and it was used until 1938 when the big GPO building was built in Jerusalem. These are the first stamps. The 1 piaster indigo was issued on the 10th of February and the 5 million on the 16th. So that ended the first interim period. I'm not going to get into the stamps. There's other talks on the stamps of Palestine, but you will see these on the early covers from Jerusalem. So here's the Palestine #1. It's on again, the cancel is the SZ 44, 44 being the number assigned to Jerusalem. And it's again on canceling the date on one line. It's a pretty cover in October 1918. Here's the cancel with the date in 2 lines. You see the 2nd March 1918 in 2 lines. Here's the blues were replaced by a set of typograph stamps from 1 mil to 20 piaster. These were issued in 1918 between September and December of 1918. And you can see here the postage, it adds up to 1 piaster for the registration fee and 4 milliams for the cost of sending a postcard. It was sent to Port Said in Egypt. You can see a mute registration label at the right there. It was validated with the SZ 44 cancel. Again, this is the cancel 1 line, whereas the other cancel on the stamps is the cancel with 2 lines. There's an SZ 7, which is in Jaffa. It's a transit marking, and then a Port Said arrival cancel on this cover. Okay. Now SZ2. SZ2 was also in Jerusalem. It was to be used by the military, and most of the mail that you see from SZ2 is military mail, but it was used at times by civilians. And here's a civilian cover sent from SZ2 in January 1919. This cancel can be found from roughly September 1918 to January 1920. It's an engraved cancel, so the type can't be removed. Only the dates can be changed. And it's registered. It's got a 2 piaster typograph stamp paying the 1 piaster foreign rate that's outside of Palestine, and 1 piaster registration fee. It was it was registered with a OETAEF, which we'll come to in a moment, a cancel to validate the registration label, and it has a Palestine censorship. It went to General Headquarters, and that's Post Office GM1. GM1 is where mail was censored. So on the back of the covers, you see a GM1 cancel when the cover entered censorship, and then another GM1 cancel when the cover left censorship. And you'll see this on a lot of Palestine covers from this period. And again, we have Port Said cancels and a Bern arrival cancel. This went to the Bureau International de la Paix, which is the earliest peace organization in the world. And it actually won the 1910 Nobel Peace Prize. So it's been around, and it's still around, been around for quite a long time. You can also rarely find this packet cancel. It says Army Post Office. It was here used on a block of 4 of the light blue lithograph stamp. Again, it was registered. Registration was validated again with an SZ 44 cancel. So we know the date from the validation cancel in July of 1918. This was sent to Pakedim and Amr Kalam, which is an organization that collected money for yeshiva, for Jewish settlements in Palestine. And again, it must have been quite a heavy packet because it's quite got quite a bit of postage in there. I wrote it down here. I think it's 3 times. It's a triple rate cover. Okay. So when the Occupied Enemy Territory Administration took over in Palestine, they brought out a series of cancels, And the ones here from Jerusalem, you can see they say OETA EEF for Occupied Enemy Territory Administration, Egyptian Expeditionary Force, Jerusalem. These were used from 1918 December to March of 1920. There are two hammers, one in which there's a dash between the OETA and the EEF, and the other in which there's a dot between the OETA and the EEF. And both of these are on this cover. The dash is on the stamp and the dot is on the registration label. And the other way you can tell them is the placement of the year, 19, is higher in one and lower in the other. So you can distinguish these two engraved cancels. Now this is a skeleton cancel that was used from 1918, 1920. OETA EEF, again, Jerusalem. This one, because it's a skeleton cancel, the type could be removed, cleaned, and replaced. And in the result of that is that a bunch of different varieties of this cancel exist, or they could have been different hammers. We don't really know. With the placement of the letters and the spacing of the letters, and you'll see some examples. So here's a cover. It's obviously to a stamp dealer from the Palestine Post Office, sending stamps to London, and there's very high values, the 20 piaster to 9 piaster typograph stamps, way overpaying the foreign fee. Presumably this was the only way to get used examples of these high value stamps on a commercial cover. On the back of this, which I'm not showing, there's a London hooded registration transit and the British oval cancel for Norwood, where this stamp stop was located, as an arrival cancel. Okay. So here are two more these skeleton cancels. The cancel on the left, the 2 millim printed matter rate going to New York, has a missing A in Jerusalem, and that's a constant variety. So this hammer seemed to missing the A, and you can find it from 1919 to 1920, and it's reasonably common. The one on the right is another cancel in which the L in Jerusalem is raised, and this was only used for a very short time in December 1919, and is a little harder to find. Now here we have, I'm going to get my notes. I miss anything? Okay, here we have two more covers, and you'll notice the spacing between OETA EEF varies greatly. On the cover on the left, it's going to Jaffa. It's got the 5 millim internal rate. It's got the close spacing of OETA EEF, whereas the cover on the right has a very wide spacing. It's a registered cover. I'm showing the back so you can see this cancel. It was a cancel from Jaffa to Jerusalem. This wide spacing used in February 1920 is really very scarce and hard to find. There's an inset of the front, the registration, and again, it paid the 1 piaster registration fee and the 5 millim internal postage rate. Okay, here's another variety. In this case, it's switched around. So the EEF is on the left and OETA on the right, and the A is missing. It's just occupied enemy territory. And you can find this for a short period, December 1919, January 1920. It's used here on a telegraph form. It's the only example I've been able to find of this. Again, a variety presumably arising from the way they put the type back into the hammer. Here we have the Jerusalem RGD cancel. This is really quite a rare cancel. It was only brought into use in January of 1920 and used till August when the OETA ended and the civil administration took over. It's used here on a 2 piaster typograph stamp, paying the 1 piaster registration fee and the 1 piaster foreign mail to Lucerne, Switzerland. On the back, there's a portside transit and a Lucerne arrival cancel. And this one is quite a rare Jerusalem cancel. Here's another rarity. This is the Jerusalem MO money order. This is the only known use on a commercial mail cover. It's on a registered cover to Egypt. Again, it's way overpaying the postage rate, which would have been 2 piastres. And but again, the Jerusalem MO is quite. This is from the Adler Bloom collection, and it's quite a rare item in Jerusalem. Okay, so now we'll come to the civil administration, which started in July 1920. This the cancel on the. These are both, again, skeleton cancels, so the type is removable, and you can see some variations. And the one on the left, you can see is a going to Beirut, well, Syria. Beirut was in Syria at this time, and you can see here the postage. This is paying 16 milliamps, and so it's paying an overweight. It's an overweight cover, and the cover on the right is a postcard with the E in Jerusalem missing. This again is constant March, April 1921, and I've seen multiple examples of this. So again, 2 variations of the single circles. Now, there are a lot of different single circle hammers, and it's really difficult to distinguish them. So what Glassman and Sacker did is they produced these sort of transparencies. They're on tracing paper, and you can overlay the cancel and figure out which one it is. So these are the sheets that were included in the original Glassman Sacker book. It wasn't included in the later copies, but it's really very helpful in distinguishing which hammer you have on a cover, because many of these are quite common and others are quite scarce. So you want to know which one you might have on a cover. Okay, so here's another single circle. Again, there's lots of these. These are the engraved cancels. You can see that this is what I'll call the workhorse cancel. This cancel and mainly the universal machine cancel you'll see in a little bit. 90% of the covers you see are one of these 2. So they're really very common. But of course, there's different single circle cancels. And so, as I said, some are scarce, some are not so scarce. So the cover on the left is censored in Jerusalem in the very early days of World War II. It's November 1939. It has a Jerusalem 6 censor lid was opened and resealed, and it has the 25 mil. It went the Ala Littoria, so the Italian airline, because Italy had not entered the war yet, and this was the first day of the 25 mil rate. And so you can see the 2 stamps paying the 25 mil rate, airmail rate to Europe. And then on the cover on the right went by KLM. It was overweight, and so it was charged 3 penny postage due when it arrived in England. And again, many examples of these single circle cancels can be found. Now, this is a record sheet. It's only part of it. It's actually larger than you see here. They were 8 by 13 inches. They had 48 squares. And this is the way the post office accounted for things. So each day, the clerk who took a cancel from stores made an impression on this sheet, initialed it. And then when he brought it back at night, he initialed it and again made an impression on the sheet. And this goes in, day out. Same thing, same cancel, same person taking it, or different people, day in, day out. There's actually 2 different cancels on this sheet. One is 24 millimeters, one is 25.5 millimeters in diameter. But it's the way the post office kept track of their hammers. I have a number of these. I've written some stuff on this in the Middle East Philatelist on articles about these sheets, because some of them are really quite interesting. So this is the transparency that they made for double circle cancels. Now, most double circles are engraved cancels. They have 2 bars and a Maltese cross, and they vary in diameter. They vary in the size of the Jerusalem text. They vary in the thickness of the bars. So so again, these overlays let you find which one you have. Again, some are very, very common. Some are less so. In addition, there were 2 cancels are used early on that are quite interesting. So the first one is this one. It's on just a printed matter cover going to Niagara Falls in the US. What they did here is simply they filed off the OETA EEF. So it's just filed away, and all you see is Jerusalem when the civil administration took over. And although this council says used from July 1920 to December 1935, it was used pretty rarely. And so every now and then it, for some reason or other, got taken out of stores and used. Here it's used to cancel stamp where the machine cancel, the Krag machine cancel, missed the stamp because of the way this the corner card is designed on this envelope. And here's another one where Jerusalem is on the top and the bars and the Maltese cross are missing. This is mainly found used on forms like the PT form 15 here on this slide. Rarely is it found used on a cover. This is from a Glassman's collection. It's used on a postcard as an arrival cancel postcard from Russia. And again, very rare to find these on mail. Mostly you see them on receipts and things like this, but again, not that common. So that you can collect many different covers of the double circle bars and Maltese cross. They're very common. And there's a cover from India that was underpaid, and so there's 16 mils in postage due on this cover. The cover on the right is a censored cover. It was resealed, and you can see it's got the OAT hand stamp that was onward air transport, which was used for a batch of covers that were going by airmail. The top cover got this hand stamp, and all the others in the batch would not receive it. But you can find many different covers, and of course make quite interesting collections just of the double circle. Now in Jerusalem, they also used triangle cancels. And this was followed the British system of using triangle cancels for mail that didn't need to have a date. It was what we now call second class or junk mail. And the one on the left is just JSM, abbreviation for Jerusalem, and is used from September 1920 to November 1924. Shouldn't really have been used on foreign mail, but here it's on a cover to Balboa, California. Mostly these were used during the Jewish New Year time when there was a ton of mail and they had to get the mail moving quickly. And the cover on the right is another triangle. This time they abbreviated Jerusalem just as J.M. And this can be found from 1938 to 1941, building area, December 1941. And it's, again, used here locally on a printed matter cover to B'nai Barak. Now there's other types that were used. In this case, the entire Jerusalem is written out. These can be found from 1940, 1948. You see here a cover on the left. It's a 2 mil printed matter rate. On the right, we have a later use of 3 mil printed matter rate, Tel Aviv. And the cover on the right, it's the cancel's in red. And that's unusual because normally red in the British system is reserved for prepaid mail. So normally you see this in black, very rarely in red, but again, Jerusalem written out. And this is a very rare Jerusalem triangle cancel. It's used here in February 1942. It's a mute cancel. And it was, although Proud says it was used from March to June 1944, this card is dated February 1942. And it's the only example I've seen. It's a 7 mil internal postcard rate to Tel Aviv. Again, quite a rare cancel. Okay, let's go to some machine cancels. So the first machine cancels introduced in Palestine were Krag machine cancels. These were made by the Norwegian company Krag, which made a lot of machines for the British Post Office. So in Britain, you find a lot of Krag cancels. On the left, we have a cover going to, if I remember, I think it's Iraq, Baghdad, Iraq. And it's on the first airmail where Palestine mail was allowed to go airmail to Iraq. Now, the British had set up an airmail system run by the Royal Air Force from Egypt to Iraq back a few years earlier in 1921. But Palestine mail was allowed to go in 1925. And this is a reasonably scarce first flight cover from Palestine. You can see here the Crag Council has a bridge in the date. There's a date bridge. Now, there was another machine brought in at the same time, or not, I don't say another machine, another cylinder. So in a Crag cylinder, it's a round cylinder which has two data hubs and two obliterator bars, the five wavy lines. And as it goes round and round, it continuously cancels the cover. So you see the cancel continuously across the cover. And here again, the post office had trouble canceling the stamp. They had to try 3 different ways till they finally got it canceled. But in this hammer, the word Palestine appears in the obliterator part. So there were 2 cylinders at least used, one without Palestine, just 5 wavy lines, one with Palestine, and they're both used for a number of years and are relatively common to find. Now, later on, they replaced the cylinder in 1928, and this was used to 1935, where the bridge is gone, and the lines, the wavy lines, the obliterated part are narrower. They're thinner wavy lines. And this is a 3 mil printed matter rate, but it's a postcard, and the person tried to get it under there's a rate where if you had 5 words or less on the postcard, you could send it for a printed matter rate. This had more than that. Actually, at the cylinder became 6 words. So it was charged postage due when it arrived in Biarritz in France. And then the person had moved, so it was forwarded from Biarritz. But again, charged postage due by the French because it had more than 5 words with the date and signature. Okay. Now I'll get the date here. Yeah, it's August 1939. In August 1939, a new head was brought in. It's sort of a bridge type, but it has the number 1 at the bottom of the cylinder. You see the 1 in brackets, the bottom of the cylinder. Now, this was used for a very short time because the war broke out in September, just a few, basically a couple of weeks after this was introduced. And so this cancel was moved to the censorship office, and they replaced the wavy lines with passed by censor Jerusalem. And this one's used in October 1939. It was usually found on the back of covers that had been opened and resealed by the postal authorities at the beginning of World War II. And, Glassman and Sacker described this as a very, very rare cancel passed by censor. It's amazing what you see on the internet and eBay and Delcamp, because a number of these have shown up over the years. So it's not as rare as you might think. And I have several examples, but the time they wrote their book, it was considered unique. They'd only seen one example. So this was used till basically they brought in the universal cancel. So they replaced the Crag machines with the universal frankers, universal postal frankers made this machine. Again, they were also used in Great Britain. They were all very similar. The only thing that changed is they had each year, they changed the data hub. So for 1942, 43, 44, et cetera, this is used from 1938 to 1948. This is sort of a pretty cover by Imperial Airways from the King David Hotel to England. But again, this cancel is extremely common. You see lots and lots of examples of this cancel. You can make quite a nice collection if you just want to collect these. Okay, now the British authorities saw the value of replacing the obliterator with a slogan. And so they introduced slogans to advertise both internally and externally, internationally. They did this in Britain. They did this also in Palestine. So the first slogan cancel they introduced was to advertise the buy Jaffa oranges. And you can see on the left, the Krag cancel, which was used from 1933 to 1935. And on the right, universal cancel, which was used from 1936 to 1940. Now, these are trilingual. They're in English, French, and German. And you'll notice in the cover on the left in the German cancel, on one side of the cylinder, the Krag cylinder, instead of an UND for the German and, they have AND, the English and. So there was an error there, but it's constant in that cancel. And then you can see on the universal, of course, which is not a continuous cancel, it just cancels the stamp. You see the same advertisement, buy Jaffa oranges. Another cancel that was used both in Britain and in Palestine is this cancel, keep death off the road, which was basically to advertise, for traffic safety. In Palestine, it had a dual meaning because of the chaos that was going on at the time in 1947 in Palestine with the riots and so forth. But anyways, it's trilingual. Again, it's English, Arabic, and Hebrew, and it's reasonably common. You can find it from June 1947 to April 1948. Now, a series of cancels were produced by the Palestine authorities to advertise fairs that took place in Palestine. The first one was this one for Visit the Palestine and Near East exhibition in 1929. It's again, trilingual. It's Arabic, Hebrew, and English. Here it's used as an arrival cancel on a postcard from the Zeppelin flight, the LZ-127 flight that went from Friedrichshafen in March 1929 to it went to Palestine. It had a number of mail drops in Egypt and in Athens and Budapest and in Vienna, but there was supposed to be a drop in Jerusalem, but that didn't take place because it was dark when the Zeppelin was over Jerusalem. So the mail was dropped in Tel Aviv. It was actually the mailbag was lost, and it was found by someone, and so the mail was recovered. And although it was recovered in Tel Aviv, it received its arrival cancel in Jerusalem. This trilingual cancels on the back of the Zeppelin card. And again, there's quite a bit of history around these cards, and they're very, very interesting to study, and many different examples of uses and so forth. But you can find them with different, you can also find them with other Palestine arrival cancels. Here's the 11th Fair in 1932, and this incorporated the flying camel. The flying camel was the symbol of the fair. There were, now on the left, you see the cancel, the machine cancel. It's a Krag machine cancel, but there's an error in the date, and that's marked with the red arrow. The date, the Arabic symbol is backwards. And this was thought to only be a proof and not to be used on mail. But a few years ago, I found this cover. It's a cover from the United States, in which this error was actually used as an arrival cancel on a cover from 1932. It's the only example I've seen. On the right, you see the corrected cancel, which is the one you see on mail from February to April 1932. And again, these are not common, but you do find them. They do show up on eBay from time to time. Now, this one is actually quite scarce. This is the purely Arab fair of 1934. So it was in Jerusalem, whereas the other fairs were in Tel Aviv. And this is, of course, just in Arabic and English, as advertising an Arab fair. It was used from March to May 1934, but it was only used very, very rarely on the Krag machines, because at the same time, they were advertising the fair in Tel Aviv, the 11th fair. And so only once in a while did they actually put this cylinder in. And here's a cover. Interestingly, a few of these have shown up on eBay. They all have the same cachet of the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, and they're all addressed with the same typewriter. So luckily, somebody wrote some greetings from Jerusalem in Easter 1934. This cancel got used, and so now we have examples, because this is a pretty scarce cancel to find. So this is the one that was on the left, is the one that was mostly used during that period in 1934. It's again got the flying camel. It's a crack cancel. It was used from February to May, and it's you can find them. They're not common, but they're not difficult. On the right, you find the universal cancel. So this is not a continuous cancel, a single cancel. It's got the revised flying camel for 1936 fair, and it can be found from February to June 1936. And it's again, like I said, these can be found. I'm going to turn now to talk about registered mail. So the first registered mail, they didn't have a British oval type registered cancel yet. And so what they used was this single circle cancel from September 1920 to July 1921. And here it is on a cover sent to Germany. This was opened in Hanover, opened in Munich. And they were looking to see if money, at the time it was the great inflation in Germany, they were looking to see if there was money in this envelope. So that's why it was opened and looked at. And you can find this cancel, it's pretty scarce on registered mail from Jerusalem, September 1920 to July 1921, but you can find them. And so what they did in July 1920 is they got this skeleton cancel with Jerusalem RGD. And this is the cancel that's actually on the cover of the Glassman and Sacker book. It's a pretty scarce cancel. Here is an example used to Oakland, California on August 16th. In the back, it's got a New York double oval transit and an Oakland double oval arrival. The stamps make up the 2 piastre rate, 1 piastre for the typograph stamps, 1 piastre for registration, and 1 piastre for the foreign mail rate. And again, this is a reasonably scarce cancel, but you can find them. So like they did for the others, there were a whole bunch of oval registered cancels following the British system of using oval cancels for registered mail. And they differ in the size and shape of the oval, and the size of the text, and the position of the text. And so you need these overlays to help you identify the cancel. Otherwise, you're doing a lot of measurements, and you can do those measurements, but they're a pain. So, but just overlaying it, you can tell which of the cancels you have. Some are pretty common, some not so common. So here's a couple of examples of the Jerusalem registered cancel, the oval, one on a cover that's on postal station. It was printed locally at the Syrian Orthodox convent in Jerusalem. It's got a typograph stamps adding for the postage, 26 mils. It's paying the registration fee, and then it's a double, I believe it's a double weight cover. No, sorry, 13 mils postage and 13 mils, 30 mils postage, 13 mils registration at the time. And then the cover on the right is a registered insured cover. It's got a number of interesting markings on it. It was sent in September 1937 to Poland. It has 13 mil registration stamp. Now it's imprinted. These were printed in England. The stamp is now imprinted, and it was uprated with you see the pictorial stamps, 13 to 22 mils pictorial stamps to pay 10 mil insurance for poor Palestine pounds, and 12 mils was the postage. So you can find, quite nice registered covers. They're really interesting to look for. Here's another interesting registered cover, one that I kind of like. It was from Jerusalem to New York, but it was, of course, in October 1941, and so they couldn't send it by airmail through Europe because the route was blocked because of the war. And so the BOAC, British Overseas Airways, in collaboration with Pan Am, developed this route. So it went from Africa and the Middle East. It went across to Karachi and then to Singapore. Let's see, Singapore, or Hong Kong, where it met the Pan Am flight. So it was once every couple of weeks. they had this flight. It went across Asia. You can see here, went from Gaza to Karachi to Hong Kong, and then taken over by Pan Am, which took it to Manila, Guam, Wake, across the Pacific, Honolulu, and then to San Francisco, and then into the US mail system. This cover was opened by the censor, it was censored, it was, look at what, it has a Honolulu cancel of October 29th, I think it is. Sorry, November 29th. That's right. So it must have missed a flight because it was originally sent in October, got to Honolulu on November 29th. This was the second to last flight before the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and this route ended. And so again, you can see all the marks here. It got to New York, it then had to be redirected to Orange, New Jersey, East Orange, New Jersey. And it's quite an interesting cover to follow its route. And again, you can do this with registered covers because they have all these very interesting markings. Here's another very interesting registered cover. Now, it was sent from Jerusalem to Brazil, to Recife, Pernambuco, Brazil. Now, it's marked here via Zeppelin, Friedrichshafen. And so what this cover has, it was registered. It went from, so what happens, it missed the flight, the Zeppelin flight. And so it was sent alternatively to Stuttgart via Hanover on the alternate Deutsche Lufthansa system, which they had, which was catapult mail. And the catapult mail, this cover was sent from Stuttgart to Seville, Spain, to Las Palmas, Canary Islands, to Bathurst in Gambia, and then was flown to the ship, the Schwabenland, which was sitting in the Atlantic Ocean. And then from there, it was catapulted to across the to Recife or Pernambuco in Brazil to speed up the mail because it had missed the Zeppelin flight to get to South America. And it's interesting because the catapult mail is far rarer than the Zeppelin mail. There's only 3 known examples of where the catapult mail. There were actually apparently 7 covers sent. It was going to go on the first concession of Palestine mail to South America, but missed that. So it went by this catapult. 3 covers have survived, which you can find if you look through auction listings that I've done. And again, I've written this up in the Society of Israel Philatelists, the Israel Philatelist. It's a very, very interesting cover. It's one of the things I like about these registered covers is they have some history to tell. Now here's another Jerusalem oval on this cover with tons of markings on it that we won't really get into, but just get my notes here. So just a second. So this cover was sent to Judenburg, Austria on December 17, 1947, with a Jerusalem registered cancel, but the Jerusalem is offset to the left and there's nothing to the right. It looks like some word was filed away. So from July 1937 to April 1948, you can find these. Now it's a long period of time, but it wasn't that often used. So it's a fairly scarce cancel. You can find a few examples. But what was the word that was missing? And we don't know what it is. My guess, it was Jerusalem Express or something like that, but we don't really know what should have been in that word. So here's, and this cover, of course, went to Jerusalem via Haifa. It was returned to the because the recipient couldn't be found, so it ended up back in Jerusalem. And Jerusalem, they couldn't really find who was to receive this letter. Another cancel was used was Jerusalem Express. This is an engraved cancel. It's pretty common. Here it is to a cover, express cover to Dr. Hochster, who is a very famous Palestine philatelist. And it's got the express fee of 40 mils, and the remaining 20 mils is an overpayment of 4 mils on the double weight rate from Jerusalem to Haifa, from the consulate of Switzerland. Maybe passport with a visa or something was in there, probably. Okay, parcel post cancels. Now, to begin with, the British, following as they did in Britain, they simply had a single a skeleton cancel with the letters PP at the bottom. This was used rarely from September 1921 to November 1928. PP again stands for parcel post, and you can find this on receipts for parcels and stuff. I've never if there's a piece on a parcel, I haven't seen one. Another cancel, which is very rare, is only used in July 1935. It's very large. It's 36 millimeters, and it's only been found on receipts. And here it is on the back of the receipt from July 29, 1935. This is from Michael Sacker's collection, and it's one of the unique parcel post cancels. On the right, we see a typical receipt. This is a customs receipt, or parcel receipt rather, for 180 mils. Paid with third postage dues of Palestine, and it's paying an import tax. And this cancel is an engraved cancel. It's used from 1922 to 1937. This is what you mostly see. See lots of these parcel post cancels. See them on a lot of high value stamps. It's a reasonably common cancel. Here are two other cancels. The one on the left is a Jerusalem parcel post cancel. They're both engraved types. The one on the left is used in January 1935. It's a 23 millimeter cancel. It's the only example I've seen of this cancel, of this hammer, used in 1935. There are probably others out there, just haven't been measured. And on the right, we see another variation in which parcel post Jerusalem, the way the text is said is different than is typical. Where typically it was Jerusalem at the top, parcel post at the bottom. And you can see here that it's used on a receipt to right to the end of the mandate and the last year. You can find these. Now, the Jerusalem Depot, there were two of these hammers. I'm only showing one here. One's larger than the other. This is the larger one. They were used on acceptance forms, when you pay duty or bring package in or things like that. So they validated dispatch. They were used on receipts. They're used from August 1946 to the end of the mandate, April 1948. Both of them can be only found on receipts as far as I'm aware. Okay, now we come to some very interesting cancels, the postage paid cancels of Jerusalem. Now, when they introduced the typograph stamps, when the civil administration took over in September 1920, they very quickly ran out of the low value stamps. There was a run on them and people wanted them and so forth. So they ran out. So to send letters, they had these skeleton cancels made. The first one just says Jerusalem paid mills. There's no date and there's no value. It was used for a few days in September 1920. Now it's on there on the by the red arrow. The problem is all these cancels used a red ink which faded with time. And so the only way you can normally see them is by the indentation of the hammer on the paper of the envelope. And they're quite scarce and they're not easy to find. Very shortly after September 1920, they actually included a value in the manuscript. And you can see here, this one had a 1 for 1 millim value. These again were used for a few days in 1920. Very quickly, they introduced two new cancels, and these have the values included and the date. So these are new skeleton cancels. They were introduced in September, and then later in September, used till November 1920. They had 3 mil one, the 5 mils, internal rate, printed matter rate, so forth. They're very hard to see because of this faded red ink used for a few days in September 1920. Interesting, the 3 mils on the printed matter is it's an inverted 3. But you can find these if you look carefully at covers, and you can see the date because they also had to add a date stamp with the date. Again, typical single circle date stamps, so we know when they were used. Later on in 1923, they introduced another type. This one here you can see it is an engraved cancel. It's got the value, it's got the date in 2 lines. It's printed matter, it's the 3 mils. What happened here was This is a, what cover sent to the US, which there were tons of these soliciting for donations. Here we have a 2 mil stamp. It underpaid the 5 mil rate. And so the 3 mils was paid and it was indicated with this date stamp. There's also a very unusual hammer on the 2 mil stamp. It's the only one I've seen of that sort of hammer. And you can find these in January to May 1923 for added postage rates. Later on, 1924, they introduced another hammer used from 1924 to 1925. See another one on the right, used from 1926, 1927. These were again for postage paid. Interestingly, the cover on the left, they used black ink, very unusual. The British always used red ink for postage paid, but here for some reason, this also has a Jerusalem triangle. Perhaps they used it in error. They just wanted to date the letter with the Jerusalem triangle and accidentally took a postage paid hammer. We don't really know. And on the left, a typical example with, again, the fading red ink. We see these cuts. These are double circles with a bridge. They were used from 1928, basically to the end of the mandate. You can see them with different values, 2 mil, 3 mil, 5 mil, as the postage rates went up. You can see them with and without the M for mills in Palestine. It's mills at this time. Typically, you see them on Red Cross postage message schemes. These were sent, often to get messages to people in the occupied countries or to find out about relatives in occupied countries through the British Red Cross. You see these on eBay sometimes at exorbitant sums. People ask for them. They're not that rare, and they shouldn't be being sold for very large sums of money. But you do see them quite commonly. Now we come to some very rare cancels. The postage paid machine cancels are very hard to find. This one here is a Krag machine. You can see the bridge, the date, the 5 wavy lines. This was used February, March 1929. It should have been in red. Here you see an example in black, canceling a stamp. So presumably they put the wrong head in the Krag machine. They put the postage paid head in instead of the regular one. This is interesting in that on the two sides of the cylinder, one side had the date, the other side is blank. So they hadn't even filled that out. But these covers are relatively hard to find with these machines. Here's another type of machine cancel that's again hard to find. They're Krag continuous machine cancels. 1926 with the word Palestine. 1927 Palestine is removed. They're bridge type. You see them at one's 2 mils or 3 mils, depending on what the postage, the rate was. These cancels are. There were also cancelled apparently with the 11th Fair, the Tel Aviv 11th Fair slogan, postage paid cancels. I've never seen them. I'd sure like to get my hands on some, but apparently they do exist, where these Krag cancels with the Near East exhibition and even the Jaffa oranges apparently do exist, and there are pictures of them in the Glassman book, but I've never seen an example. Here's another extremely rare one. It's the double square. It's again a paid cancel is used on a Red Cross message scheme, as we said, to messages. It's going to Ramat Gan. I think only a couple of examples of these are known to exist. It's a universal cancel. And it's, of course, you see it's only a single head. You don't see the continuous of the Krag machine cancels. Jerusalem Return Letter Office. These covers are always incredibly interesting and have wonderful stories to tell. Now, we're very lucky because these covers that were returned to the Palestine Return Letter Office were collected and were sold to dealers. And so they exist now. Nowadays, with all the privacy legislation, that would never happen. But we can have some wonderful covers, like this one. This is one of my favorite covers. It's from Jerusalem, and it's actually from Mea Shearim, and it's got the Jerusalem 1 you see on the registration label, very rare Jerusalem 1 cancel used by the Occupied Enemy Territory Administration on the registration label and on the stamps. It went to Shanghai. It was transferred from the British Post Office to the Chinese Post Office, and you can see that transfer cancel there. They tried to deliver it to the Yemeni Jewish organization. They couldn't find it. And so it sat in the Shanghai dead letter office for a year. And then finally, they decided to return it to Palestine. So they returned it. So it gets transferred from the Shanghai dead letter office back to the British Post Office. It got the manuscript returned to sender. It went via Alexandria, where they added another return to sender marking. It got to Jerusalem in September 1920, where it's now the civil administration. So the OETA had ended. We have the civil administration. So it's got the civil administration. It's got this RLO, this very rare RLO cancel. So on this cover, we have a very rare Jerusalem Mea Shearim, the Jerusalem 1 OETA EF cancel, and we have this RLO cancel. It's a wonderful cover. Again, I've written this up in the Israel Philatelists. Here's another very interesting RLO cover. It went from Jerusalem to Beirut, Lebanon. They're trying to find, get a hold of this person via the American consul. I missed them. So they went to Galatia, Istanbul. That went to, across the Middle East. It went to Baghdad. And it finally was returned to Jerusalem. They never found this person. It's got a ton of markings, which you can follow as here on the right. And it ends up now with the engraved RLO cancel. There are a couple of these different hammers, but again, the returned letter office, it sat there, it was never claimed. They could not find the who sent it. And so it ended up being sold off to dealers, and it survived. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the sub office. I'm running out of time here, but this is Jerusalem Mea Shearim. This is that Jerusalem 1 cancel. So shortly after the British took over in Jerusalem, the oldest post office was in the very Orthodox neighborhood outside the old city. And the British postal authorities reopened this branch office with its old name, Mea Shearim, but only the index 1 on the cancel. To the right of Jerusalem. And this can be found from January to March 1920. There wasn't a lot of mail, and it's pretty scarce skeleton cancel. Here we see it on a printed matter cover to Rabbi Manischewitz in Cincinnati. So quite a nice cover. Shortly afterwards, the OETA EF developed other more informative, shall we say, skeleton cancels. First, there's this one, which Mea Shearim, it OETAEF and JSLM for Jerusalem in abbreviation, used from March to July 1920. It's used on a postcard to Beirut, sent in September 1920. 4 million, I think it's 2 million. Sorry, I'm looking at the wrong cover. Yeah, I wanted to look at this one. I moved my notes too fast. Hang on, I want to do this one first. And so this one's the 2 million. It's going to Los Angeles, and it has the Mea Shearim JSL, a pretty scarce cancel as well. And now we go to these two covers. So here we have the civil administration. So the OETA EF is removed, and from August to September, we have this cancel with Mea Shearim, and then they changed it to the Sephardic spelling Mea Shearim from September to December. And you can see they're used on a postcard and used on a letter to Germany, to Cologne, Germany. Both of these cancels are reasonably scarce, but you can find them. Later on, of course, they used engraved cancels sent from Britain. This was the double circle cancel. You can see it on the left here. It was used, my notes. So it was used from 1921 to 1948 here on a registered cover. Mayor Sharim was given the number Jerusalem 1, and so as you saw in that cancel, and so the registration labels for that office have Jerusalem 1 written on them. On the right, we have a single circle engraved cancel used from 1934 to 1948, but rarely used. So take it out of stores rarely. And here you see it on a 3 mil printed matter cover to Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania. So two Meah Shearim cancels. There were additional Meah Shearim cancels. This one, if I can find my notes, on the left is on a money order used from 1940, 1941. It's a rather large cancel, and it's 100 mil money order. This cancel was fairly rarely used. It's tough to find. And on the right, we have the double circle Meah Shearim cancel. This was thought to never be used and only been in postal stores. But here's an example I found on a receipt. So it was actually used, at least in January 1941. And it's the only example I've seen of that cancel. Citadel. The Citadel office was opened sort of near in the mandate. This cancel is it's an engraved single circle. It was used from November 1929 to April 1948. It was located in the Armenian quarter of the old city. It handled mail from inhabitants as well as a large number of pilgrims in this area. This is a registered express cover to Haifa. They didn't have any Citadel registration labels at this time. Citadel was given the number 10, Jerusalem 10. So they took the Meah Shearim labels and just added a manuscript 0 for 10 for Citadel. It has a Jerusalem oval cancel as well on the back, and the arrival, and Haifa oval arrival, and so forth. And it pays 65 mils, pictorial stamp pay, 15 mil registration fee, 40 mils express fee, and 10 mil internal postage. Here's another double circle cancel used in Citadel here on a parcel dispatch form. This was used from 1929 to the end of the mandate, reasonably common. It's here on a parcel dispatch to a package to Cleveland. It has 3 pictorial stamps paying 170 mils for a package of 4.7 kilograms. Greek colony. This is an engraved cancel. This office opened in June 1929. It handled very, very little mail, but it remained open until the end of the mandate. It was on Emek Rephaim Street, and it's not far from the German colony post office. This is one of the rarest Palestine cancels. It was used for about 11 months, but very rarely. Here we have it on a cover to South Devon in Great Britain. It's got a mute registration label. Nothing was added to it. And this was replaced by this cancel. This is an engraved Greek colony double circle used from July 1930 to 1948. It's scarce, but you can find these. Here's an airmail express cover to now that we have the registration label, you can see the Jerusalem 20. So we have 3 different etiquettes on here. 20 was the number given to this this office. Let me just get my notes. Yeah, so it was mailed to Amsterdam, November 18, 1937. It's got the correct registration label. It went via KLM. It has a Lydda Airport transit. It has the red express, the blue airmail etiquettes. Cover arrived in Amsterdam on November 22nd, but the addressee had left for the United States. And so it was forwarded to New York, where it arrived on November 29th, has an oval New York registration on the back. And the 200 mil pictorial pays the 15 mil registration fee, 40 mil express fee, and 145 mil airmail postage. Now, I should add that there is a skeleton cancel from the German colony. I've never seen one. I've been collecting Palestine Jerusalem covers for 50 years, and I've never seen the German colony hammer. But it's in the book. It does exist, but it must be incredibly rare because I've never seen one. Mahane Yehuda was another office. This one was, you can see here, Jerusalem 6. We have an engraved single circle on the left. It's the Mahane Yehuda Bureau Office, Jerusalem. It was used from 1934 to 1935. The 31 mil postage pays 8 mils for the first 20 grams to the UK and 10 mils for an additional 40 grams. At right, we have a double circle engraved cancel from Mahane Yehuda, here used on a receipt, used from 1936 to 1948. These are reasonably can be found, and that receipt is going to Aden in Arabia. Kind of interesting. Here's another interesting cover. It's from Mahane Yehuda in May 1944. Now, everything is blocked because of the war. And so this cover had to go via BOAC. They developed the route through Gaza, through, as you can see here, Khartoum, and then to through Africa to Lagos and Bathurst, across to Brazil, Natal, up along Brazil, through the Caribbean into Miami, and it gets a Miami arrival or transit cancel rather, excuse me, on its way to Massachusetts. It was opened by censor and resealed, and the 100 mil postage pays the 50 mil registration fee plus the postage. So an interesting route, long way round, but that's what they had to do in the Second World War. And these covers and looking at the routes of the markings on registered covers are always very interesting. Rehavia. Rehavia was another bureau office. This one was the last branch to be opened at 21 Karen K. Emma Street. It was used by the Jewish Agency for Palestine, mainly by Central European immigrants who settled there in the late 1930s. And this council was used from 1937 to 1948. There's also a single circle council used less so on the Jerusalem 18 registration labels. That's the number given to that office. And you can see the cover on the right, it's going to England. It actually pays the triple airmail rate of 25 mils per 10 grams. Excuse me. So interesting covers up. These can be found, they're not super scarce. This one's scarce. So there was another cancel in Rehavia. This was a double circle engraved cancel. They've used a few of these in Palestine, but this one was used in Rehavia. And so in this cancel, the type can be removed, cleaned, and reset. The result is that you can get, when they reset it, the type is in different places. And so you can get different varieties, and they're all really rare. So although this cancel was used from 1937 to 1948, it was rarely used. And so here's an example of a cover going to, where's it going to? Can't even remember. I think it's to France, if I remember right. And it's yeah, to Cannes, France. Used in June 1937, has a Cannes arrival cancel in the back, and the 3 pictorial stamps pay the registration fee of 13 mils and the 15 mils postage. So this is one variety. Now here are a couple of other varieties. On the one on the left, on that cover on the left, you see here, first of all, it's Jerusalem 8. And this was used by the Jewish Agency of Palestine, which was in Rehavia. And so they had their own registration labels. And here the Rehavia and the Bureau Office are really close together. And JSM is on the other side. And on the receipt, the counterfoil for a money order on the right, we see the JSM, but now the M is put in upside down. And so it's an inverted. And I'm sure other examples exist. They're all pretty scarce, but you can't find. So anytime I see one of these double circle cancels, I look very closely at how the type was reset. Okay, many consider this the rarest Palestine cancel. I'm not so sure. This is Talavera Barracks. Now, Talavera Barracks was a temporary postal agency established in 1936 for the Arab riots. The office was used by British troops in the Allenby camp on Hebron Road in the German quarter of the city. Here we have an airmail cover. It's probably philatelic with 5 pictorial stamps, but it pays the 20 mil airmail rate. And it's a pretty, I've seen a few other examples, and certainly not common, but I don't think it's as super rare as some think it is, but it is a very, very nice cancel. Okay, I'm just about finished here. I'm just going to spend a couple of minutes talking. This is another record sheet. This one's very interesting. Again, I've written up. It's used for a number of different counts: express mail, registered mail, money order counter, and different hammers were taken out by the clerks to their desk. They stamped it when they took it out. They stamped it when they returned it. And if they made an error, they had to correct it. And you can see the corrections in the right-hand margin. They were very, very careful in the use of these counts. They were meticulous. And again, I've written this up in the Middle East Philatelists. You can read more about it. Very interesting. You learn a lot by studying these sheets. So I just very quickly going to mention that in addition to the mail, the post office can run the telegraph. So here's the Central Telegraph Office on a CTO cancel on a telegram being delivered. This was envelope was printed locally. They couldn't spell telegram right, so it's telegram. And they have this telegraphs office oval, and you see a number of these. Delivery Jerusalem was used when telegrams were sent out for delivery. They had this cancel again. This was used several months in civil administration when civil administration just took over from the OETAEF. The date here is inserted in manuscript, but you can find them various ways. There's Jerusalem MO. These are not so common. MO for money order. These are receipts, and you can see 2 different ones. And a skeleton cancel on the left, and engraved cancel on the right. Used for the one on the left, used for a very short time, and it's very rare. The one on the right, you can find them. They're not so rare. This is a cachet, not really a cancel, but you see them all through the mandate on letters from the Palestine Post and Telegraph. And I won't go into this, but rarely, the one on the right is in red. It's very rare. Mostly they're in black. Jerusalem MOO, money order office. You can see here on a counterfoil, different types of engraved cancel, skeleton cancels. Again, for the services, they provided money order office. Here's another one, MOC, money order counter. Again, there were different hammers that were used. Tele accounts, of course, they also ran the telephones. And so when you paid your telephone bill, it was stamped with these. There are 2 types, one with tele accounts at the top and one with tele accounts at the bottom. You see these on receipts, and they can be found. Jerusalem, this is a rare cancel. This is telephones cancel. I think it's the only known example of this cancel. It was apparently used in the mid-1920s, but I've never seen an example, none of surface as far as I know. And it was used again in 1938 on an invitation to celebrate the opening of the new post office in 1938, the new GPO building. As far as I know, it's the only reported example of this cancel. A savings branch, they of course can learn the bank, the savings branch, and when you deposited money, they stamped your book. A Jerusalem MO, this is a rare cancel. It's missing the C in Jerusalem money order counter, and can be found in August 1945. And then savings branch, Jerusalem, you see these on these savings books. And they also, of course, driver's licenses. So here's a cancel used on a driver's license. And this, I believe, is my last slide. I didn't really want to spend too much time on these other services. Just want to give you an impression of how they really controlled pretty much everything in life by the post office in Palestine when the government was there. Okay, so that's my presentation, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Joel, thank you very much for that presentation. Les, sorry, Les, I just muted you. So Joel, thank you very much indeed for that presentation. That was an absolutely beautiful cover, the one sent to Shanghai and then returned. That's really an amazing cover. The other thing which was very nice was the GB postal order counterfoil. The GB postal orders actually used in Palestine are much rarer than the Palestine postal orders. But anyway, Joel, in the chat, there were a couple of comments and questions. Sid asked about the
I'm just trying to figure out how to
transparency.
get. Hang on, I just want to figure out how to get my picture back. I got all I get here is
Stop
Zoom.
screen sharing. Stop screen sharing.
Oh, okay. So
That should be a red button.
yeah. All right. Stop.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, great. I'm back. All right.
All right. We see
Okay,
you.
I
We
can
see
see
you.
people now.
Okay. Sid had a question for you, and unfortunately, he had to leave as he told us at the start.
Yeah.
But Sid was asking, is it possible to get a copy of the transparency that you had of the postmarks? And I don't know if you could share with us all where that came from.
I'll tell you, I have tried to print them on my printer on tracing paper, but they get stuck. It's too thin for the rollers to grab. So I mean, I have them. If somebody can tell me how I can copy them, I can photograph them. Send you a photograph.
Well, do you want to try scanning them and maybe try sending them to Sid? Because I think he would really appreciate it.
Yeah, I can
and then
certainly
give him the problem.
Yeah, I can certainly scan them, and I have scans of them actually. That's what you saw in the pictures.
Okay, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, I
and
can
then
send just make a note.
And then somebody had a question about your flying camel. That I guess the question is it really a flying camel or is it a phoenix?
Well, they called it a flying camel. That was the symbol of the 11th fairs, and and these have been written up in detail by Ed Groton, Art Groton rather, who's written quite a bit on these 11th fairs and all the cancels and all the labels and Cinderellas and so forth that were produced for these fairs.
Right.
It's called
Well,
the flying
I
camel.
have no idea about the anatomical differences between a flying camel and a phoenix. And Moshe Rima has a comment for us all.
Yes, if I may add a bit about this flying camel, the local legend says, and it's more than legend, the designer of this fair, the Levant Fair, tried to make all kind of logos for the fair, and at one point, and everything he had suggested, they said no. He wanted a camel because this was some sort of a symbol of the East, but the camel sat, camel dancing, camel nothing. And in the end, he said with the desperation, would you like him to fly? And the organizer said, that's okay, make him fly. And that's how it became the flying camel with the wings. Another version of the story says that the organizer tried to put or get the Arabs to join into this venture and participate in the Levant Fair. And some sort of pointing towards them, they put the camel in this as the symbol, because the Arabs said there is no chance that this fair will exist. Camels would fly before you could manage to organize a fair. So you have the legend, but it's a definitely flying camel and not a phoenix.
All right. Well, now Moshe, you also kindly posted in the meeting chat about a link about the German colony. Do you want to say something about that link and tell us a little more about the German colony?
Joel said he never saw one of those German colony postmarks from Jerusalem. One of the sub-projects I have done based on the Alexander collections is in the Israel Philatelist. The link I gave is for the Israel Philatelist website, where I try to gather as many catalogs. At first stage, a very simplified catalogs of all kinds, starting with the Ottoman Empire's time and up to nowadays Israel and Palestinian Authority and so on and so forth. You can look on the English side of the website. And there is about 20-something catalogs by now, which by the word catalog, I'm saying all the stamps of the mandat, all the postmark, at least one example from each post office of the mandat time, and so on and so forth. All the postmarks of the Ottoman time, different postmark, and so on. So I just gave a quick look and I saw there is one of the German colony. So I pointed the link if you want to see one. And of course, I can send you with different mail. I will send you later, Joel, the complete document, not just the postmark as I put it in the website by now.
Great, great. Yeah. Thanks.
So do we have any other questions or comments for Joel? Ed, do you have any suggestions, comments?
I
Ed?
don't. I think that was a fantastic lecture, Joel. People should see your exhibit, as I've had the pleasure of seeing. And thanks for coming and giving us this lecture and sharing all your knowledge, not just related to postmarks.
Thank you, Ed. Ed Rosen, nice to see you. We didn't see you at the beginning, but welcome. And
yeah, it was a great talk. And am I on? I can't tell you, but
Yeah, we hear you.
okay. Anyway, it was great. It was terrific. You know, you think you've seen it all until you see something like this, and then you find out you haven't seen anywhere near all of it. And Joel, it was fantastic. Anyway, thank you.
I actually liked the picture more than anything of Ed Rosen and Joel going back to 1900,
72.
whenever it was.
1975, and I wish I could say that I've lost a lot of weight, but I haven't. But I still have a lot of hair. That's about it.
so Ed, was it 1900 or 1800?
1975. So that's a long time.
Yeah.
Well, I won't say how old I was at that time, but I was quite young. So we have about 2 minutes before our
Colin, can I
Yes.
just make a quick comment? I'm just on the
Absolutely,
train.
Les.
Yeah, so first of all, Joel, what an amazing, fascinating, and very interesting talk. Thank you so much. You mentioned the post office in Keren Kayemet, which is very close to the Jewish agency. So what's very sad is that it just recently closed within the last couple of weeks.
Les, you need to speak a little louder.
Oh,
You're cutting
Okay,
out.
the post office in Keren Kayemet, which is very close to the Jewish agency, it just closed in the last few weeks. So it's just it's quite a sad, that post office that was there for so many years, and unfortunately it just closed.
Interesting.
But what a wonderful talk, Joel. It was superb. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all.
All right, Les, thank you very much. So we have a couple of minutes before we will start again. So for those of you who want to take a short break, we'll start again in about 3 or 4 minutes.